Hello, my name is Richard Rees, and I'm a member of the Society of Architectural Illustrators. Today I'm going to show you a short demonstration on how to set up a basic perspective. You should have been given an A4 base plan looking something like this, and I will be referring to this all the way through the presentation at a later point. But first I'm going to set up a few principles for us to discuss. The first is the idea of something called the horizon line. This is the line that comes out through your eye horizontally to whatever object and eventually to the horizon. A flat desert horizon is effectively your horizon line. The relationship between the horizon line and the ground line, which is approximately 1600 millimeters below that, is actually very important because this is a scale by which you gauge all buildings and how you see them. And you'll see here there's another couple of concepts. The station point, where you're standing, which I shall refer to again. The picture plane, which is where you're constructing the drawing effectively, almost like a television screen. And the building itself, which will be roughly to scale, as I will explain. This diagram explains the idea of vanishing points. What we have here are two angles. This is a two-point perspective. It's two-point because we have two vanishing points. And the vanishing point is the disappearing point of all the lines in one plane going to the horizon. You see on the left that the roof line of the building and the bottom all focused towards that point. And the vanishing points are always on the horizon line. They're never anywhere else. They're not below or above. They're always on the horizon line. And similarly, you can see that on the right-hand side. Now, one of the things about the horizon line is that it does give you a scale to the building. And you can see the 1.6 meters coming down on that corner. So if we look at that corner, we can virtually judge the heights and scale of other elements of the building. Roughly speaking, residential buildings are 3 meters high per floor to floor. And doors are roughly 2 meters high. And you can see here that I've drawn them in roughly those proportions. Similarly, the horizon line is very useful for figures. These are the key scaling elements on any drawing. And what you'll find is if you draw a line through the eyes of any figure that you put on top of a drawing, that they will always seem right. They hang from the horizon line. And you'll see here the three figures. If you get the height of the figures correctly, you can place their feet in the right position on the drawing. So that's something I shall come to and discuss in the second presentation that I'm going to do for you. So this idea of the picture plane, the television screen, in this case, I've shown a red line on the corner. This is because ideally the picture plane will touch the building to give you scale. And that's an important concept which we need to be aware of. Because you can have the building, obviously, from any station point, from anywhere where you're looking, it can be in virtually any position you like. But we're going to take position B for the purposes of this example, as it is such a good position and simple one. If we took A with the building further behind, it would look smaller. If we took C, the building would look bigger because it's in front of the picture plane. However, you have to then do some jiggery-pokery in terms of actually putting lines back to the picture plane to do some measurements. So we're going to keep it simple and we're going to do B, a building touching the picture plane. The angle of the building is also quite important when you're setting up a perspective. If you have a building which is too flat to the picture plane, in other words, a very shallow angle, what happens is that you get vanishing points when you draw the lines very far off to the left or right of the building. And these can cause problems in having to have very long pieces of paper. You'll see on the piece of paper here, you're going to have vanishing points on the piece of paper. And that's because I've chosen the 60-30 angle on the right-hand side, which is a good angle. If you want the vanishing points equally on each side, you take the 45-45. Here again, you see the station point shows you what sort of view you're going to get from there. And that's important when you're setting up a perspective, to think about the proportions of the building that you're going to get. So now we're going to start the exercise, and I suggest that you pause. I will suggest you pause at certain points so that you can catch up in terms of drawing. You're going to now draw on top of the plan that I gave you earlier on. This is an A4 perspective sheet. You will need a ruler and a pen or pencil to undertake this exercise, very simply. It's nothing else. You don't need to worry about the rules on the ruler because I've basically set up the scale for you. So step one shows these two red lines. And what I'd like you to do is draw those red lines from the station point to the corners of the building. This gives you that angle of vision. And it's actually going to be important later on when you construct the edges of the building on the perspective. So draw those two red lines first. And if necessary, pause the video at this point to give yourself time to do so. Let's go back to the section now. We're going to add this section to scale onto the drawing that you've just started. And the whole point about this is to give a scale to the elements that you're going to project across onto the plan. You'll see here I've added that section to the bottom right-hand corner of the drawing as it stands. I've given you the building elevation height. It's the top of the three lines. Shade that building in on the right-hand side first. And then you don't need to put the little man in, by the way, that's just illustrative. But put on the left-hand side, HL for the horizon line, which is the middle line, roughly halfway between the height at the top of the building and the bottom of the building, and GL for the ground line. Those two lines must go in there, very important to put in. Now, setting up the vanishing points is done by taking two parallel lines, which I've already shown on the drawing, from the station point up to the picture plane, PP, and you'll see that I've dropped a perpendicular below the where they intersect the picture plane. This gives us the positioning of the vanishing points. Logically, as you can see, the sharper angle on the left-hand side, the vanishing point is not so far away, but with a shallower angle on the right-hand side, it pushes the vanishing point to the right somewhat. So what you need to do is to mark the vanishing points, VP1 and VP2, onto your drawing. And please make sure you've got time to do that by having a pause at this point if you wish to. Don't put the vanishing points on any of the other lines. The vanishing point is always on the horizon line. For step 4, we're now bringing in the building elevation height. We're going to drag it across to the red line I've shown underneath the SP at the station point. And what this does is it brings the point where the building is touching the picture plane and the scale of the building together so that you have actually drawn the first corner of the perspective. We've drawn the vertical corner. So please draw, not the red dotted lines, but draw the vertical line of the building where I've shown it underneath the station point. Again, pause if you have to give yourself time to do that. Now we're in a position to actually get the vanishing points and the established corner together. If we know where the corner is and we know where the vanishing points are, we simply join them up. And as you can see there, the two angles, virtually equal, above and below the horizon line, give us the top of the building angle and the bottom of the building angle. So that allows us to eventually construct the whole of the building edge. But what we haven't got yet, and I will give you a moment there, pause for that if you like, and do that. And then I'll come on to what we do now to get the edges of the building. So step 6, now you'll see the reason why we did those lines which cross the picture plane from the station point to the edges of the block at the top. They actually give you the width of the building on the left-hand side and the right-hand side to scale. So if you drop a perpendicular down from the picture plane down onto the drawing there, those dotted lines, where they overlap, the lines between the vanishing points, will give you the vertical lines on the left-hand and the right-hand side of the building. So now pause the video if you wish to have time to do that. And finally, you've actually drawn a three-dimensional block, a simple rectangle that is based on the height of the building being to the same scale as the plan. So this building might be something like 8 or 9 meters long and about 2 meters, 1.5 to 2 meters wide. And you've drawn it by constructing it in the standard way of doing a 2-point perspective. And you can see, if you color that in and draw the thick outline, you'll really get the feel of the building. Again, pause if you have to. And once you've got that basic 3-meter high block with nicely in perspective like that, you can start to subdivide it. You could put a 2-meter high window on it. You can put 2-meter high door and windows on it. And then you can actually make it start to look like a building. And if you remember going back to the perspective I showed you earlier on, that is essentially the lower floor of a 3-story building. And if you take that front corner, the corner closest to you as to scale, you could then stack up, using the same vanishing points, stack up one above the other, the 3 stories, and taper them back to the vanishing points. So once you've created one rectangle on one of these perspectives, you have the ability to actually create the whole building by building outwards or subdividing. This is something well worth remembering. The follow-up to this particular presentation is how to construct an architectural image. I thought it was very important that you got to know a bit about horizon lines, vanishing points, and ground lines before you actually started doing that, because it gives you a better appreciation of what the critical things are in terms of creating an architectural image. Thank you.